You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Haristadoulou.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Greeks Gridiron. I'm Ethan Haristadoulou, and today, Thursday, it is time to make our first pick of Week 10 for the NFL. We're diving into the Bengals, heading into Baltimore for an AFC North clash. Ravens got the better of them in overtime the last time these two teams played. It was a very tight overtime contest where the Bengals had an opportunity to steal the game and ultimately lost it with a missed field goal. Ravens go down, score, ultimately finishing off the game. There's plenty to discuss, a lot to get into. Fire away in that comment section down below. Let me hear from you all. Who's winning tonight? Let me hear some of your picks for this week if you want to dive in on that as well. I'll be doing the rest of my predictions tomorrow, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss out on those. But diving in, we have ourselves Cincinnati, like I said, in Baltimore here. The Ravens, a little bit rocky in Baltimore, having a loss to a team like the Raiders. So even with this game being in Baltimore, it's definitely home field advantage. Don't get me wrong, but we have seen the Ravens accidentally give up games. So with that in mind, the Bengals clearly suited to take on this Ravens team. And not only have we seen that this year, but we've seen it in years past. This high flight passing attack from the Bengals has given the Ravens problems over the last few years with Joe Burrow under center. Both of these teams come in scoring a ton of points right now. Ravens obviously with a little bit more of an edge, scoring about 31.5 points per game to the Bengals 26. But we have seen both these teams drop 30 points or more multiple times this season. So we know that both teams can put up those numbers if the game starts to get out of hand. And as far as defense is concerned and just how these teams have fared in terms of letting up points, they're separated by technically less than a point per game. So things are very tight between the two on the defensive side and just how much they're actually giving up. But Ravens do have a slight edge in the scoring department with how dynamic their offense has been, with both Lamar throwing the football at an excellent rate this year, but also the 1-2 punch combo of the running game with Lamar and Derrick Henry. The big thing that I'm looking at for the Bengals in this game here, and one that I think cannot be stressed enough here, is how this Bengals run defense is going to manage against Henry and Lamar. Bengals currently sitting with the 8th lowest run stuff rate according to Next Gen Stats in the league. They've allowed 12 rushing touchdowns this season, amongst the highest in the NFL, and are allowing about 130 yards per game, which puts them somewhere around the middle of the pack in the NFL. The Ravens, on the other hand, as far as their offense is concerned, a whopping lead at 191 yards per game on the ground. I believe they lead the second place team by about 16, 17 yards. It's a pretty wide margin between the Ravens and everyone else. They are just running the football down teams' throats. They're averaging a massive 5.9 yards per attempt on the ground as well, with 47 runs over 10 yards or more, which is best in the NFL, and a rushing success rate of about 47%. They're ranked 4th in the NFL according to Next Gen Stats. The Bengals' run defense has not been perfect this year. They've had some bad games. They have had a couple of solid games in between, but it is something that I myself personally, and I know a lot of others have harped on, is a kind of a weakness that we've seen from Cincinnati so far. So seeing how they opt to deal with Derrick Henry and just the way he's bulldozing teams, especially in the later portions of games once defenses start to get tired and they're getting a little bit sick of dealing with the run. The Ravens are one of those teams that love to capitalize on that. So I'll be interested in that. But of course, how they manage to deal with those designed runs where you're trying to dictate who's going to get the football on this handoff here. Is Lamar going to actually hand it off? Is he going to take off with it? And just containing Lamar in general when he drops back, doesn't find someone open and takes off and uses his legs. You got some good linebackers in Pratt, and of course you also have Logan Wilson as well over there in Cincinnati. So you've got some guys that you can work with that are athletic enough that should be able to spy Lamar fairly well. It's just a matter of who's going to take on that. Is it going to be, one guy or the other? Is it a mixture of both? You maybe even, ask one of your safeties to do some of the spying as well if you have them push up closer to the line of scrimmage. Plenty to look at there. As for the other side of things, like I said, in the last few years, we've seen Joe Burrow have his way with this Ravens secondary. The injury bug has bitten the Ravens, especially in the secondary, very hard the last few years. I feel like it's almost a constant thing. Death, taxes, and injuries to the Ravens secondary. They went and added Tre'Davious White during the trade deadline, and it sounds like he will see some action in this game here. I don't know how much he has left in the tank. I feel like injuries have really slowed him down the last few years, but I'm hoping it ends up being a net positive for Baltimore. But Joe Burrow this season, tied for second in the NFL right now with 20 passing touchdowns, only 4 picks, coupled with 2,200 yards and some change, which is good for 5th in the NFL, and the 5th best completion percentage, just over 70% at 70.2. The Ravens have struggled this year defending the pass, and a lot of it has to do with just a multitude of guys being hurt week in and week out and never having your entire secondary there to play for you every single week. Whether it's starters out, whether it's depth guys out, it's been a combination of the few. I don't want to sit here and sound like I'm making excuses, but that is something that Baltimore has been dealing with a little bit more heavily than I feel other teams are, specifically in the secondary. Now, as far as numbers go, allowing 281 yards per game right now, which is the most in the NFL, 18 total passing touchdowns, tied for 3rd most, a decent chunk of those coming from Joe Burrow the last time they played, and about 6.8 yards per play, which is tied for 6th most in the league. That is definitely something I will be keeping an eye on in this game here, because it's one of those things where these two teams have shown that when things get crazy and the defenses maybe are starting to fail them, they both can put up points, and they both have clear weaknesses on defense that the opposing team's offense thrives in and loves to work through. Bengals love throwing the football. They haven't been super consistent running. The Ravens, on the other hand, love running the football. They have had some really good games throwing the football as well, and Lamar looked pretty good against the Bengals secondary. That's another thing you could keep in mind as far as this matchup goes, but there is plenty to look at when you're starting to look at just how these defenses struggle in certain situations and how these offenses thrive in those very same situations. It's kind of a matchup made for people that like points, in my opinion. I think we're going to see a ton of them. I think both these offenses are going to potentially find a lot of success. I would not be surprised if, and I'm not, again, not a betting channel, not a betting guy, but for those of you looking at over-unders, this feels like a game that could cross the over fairly easily, just because of the history that we've seen from these two teams, and the ability to score on each other is very much real. The injuries are also something that I think are worth keeping an eye on here, and some pretty big ones at that. T. Higgins did not practice Tuesday or Wednesday, so we'll see what he does here on Thursday. But if there's no T. Higgins for Cincinnati, that Bengals offense has not been nearly as effective without him on the football field. So that would be a massive blow and a must-win situation on a short week for the Bengals going into Baltimore at that. No T. Higgins definitely has me concerned. There are also some other injuries. You look at one to like Orlando Brown as well. He's been limited in practice, questionable right now. B.J. Hill on the inside has been big for Cincinnati as well. Did not participate on Tuesday, limited on Wednesday. And the Ravens, they also have some stuff worth looking at as well. Isaiah Likely is out for this game. He's a stud, maybe doesn't quite get as much production as you'd like out of him, but he is someone that when he gets hot, he can get rolling, and we've seen that from him during certain games this year. You go back to that Chiefs game and the performance he had there, literally a toenail away from getting a game-tying touchdown. So you have that to look at there. And there's also just a handful of other guys. Lamar Jackson, sounds like he's going to be good to go. No issues there. Didn't participate on Tuesday. He was a full participant yesterday, and it seems like, there was that slight concern around his knee and that injury and what was going on there, but it sounds like he's good to go. He should be playing, and I don't really think it's going to give him too much of an issue, but just some injuries worth keeping an eye on there. But the injury reports from practice these last couple of days have not really been anything too crazy, so injuries are not necessarily a concern, but there are some guys and some decent names worth keeping an eye on there. As for who I think is going to actually win this matchup, like I said, the AFC North is a wild division. You get crazy close games no matter the state of either of the teams. This division plays itself differently than any other division in the league. They are always very high tension, very, very chippy types of games in both teams, no matter who it is, whether it's these two teams or the Steelers or Browns competing in some interdivisional matchup. It's always bringing a little bit more of an intensity to it. And it does not matter the records. The teams always step up and play to each other's levels. So it's one of those more fun divisions to watch. With the Bengals in a must-win situation and the Ravens Ravens fighting for supremacy in the AFC overall and maintaining their lead in this AFC North, or trying to at the very least. I do think that both these teams have plenty on the line, that there's no reason to feel like one team needs it more than the other. Yeah, you could argue maybe the Bengals, more must-win situation, but the Ravens, they have a massive kind of like monkey on their back type deal right now, not being able to get to the finish line despite how good they've been the last few years. So the pressure is on for them every single week, regardless of what their record is. They've dropped some games. Like I mentioned, you have that one to Las Vegas in Baltimore. They need this win at home just as much as the Bengals need to win to keep their season alive. I don't really think that you could sit here and say one team needs it more than the other. But who I think is going to come out on top in what I think is going to be a high-scoring affair once again, and it's very difficult to beat teams twice, but I think the Bengals gave up their opportunity the first time around to steal that one win over Baltimore, and they'd be 5-4 coming into this game instead of 4-5 if they won that matchup. I think I like the Ravens for this game, and I had them the first time. I'm going to have them the second time here. Tough decision because, again, both these teams can play each other really well. We've seen it over the last few seasons. We saw it already once this season, but I like the Ravens. Another high-scoring affair. I'm thinking something along the lines of like 31-28. You're going to get some points. You're going to see these offenses take advantage of the defense, but I'm really concerned about T. Higgins and him being listed as doubtful, not participating in practice. If he misses this game, you couple that with the Zach Moss injury and the Bengals right now trying to figure out what they're going to do with the ground game. And Chase Brown's been pretty good, don't get me wrong, but the Bengals haven't been super consistent running the football, and you're going up against the best run defense in the league. You're going to have your hands full on that part, and if there's no T. Higgins to help supplement with that already, I'm kind of nervous for the Bengals here. So give me the Ravens, 31-28, high-scoring affair. It should be a fun one, another AFC North clash. And honestly, I'm thinking we got ourselves a good Thursday night football game here, which has been few and far in between, not even just this season, but over the last few years, especially since Amazon has taken over. So give me the Ravens, big interdivisional matchup, big win for them to help their case in maintaining a lead in the AFC. Let me know in the comment section down below, thoughts and opinions. Am I getting anything right? Am I missing anything? What am I getting wrong? All that, would love to hear from you all. But that is it for me as always. If you made it to the end, greatly appreciate it. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss picks for tomorrow. See you all next time. Have a good one.